Good morning. Before I start my talk today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. I'm a 36-year-old Torres Strait Island man who has had 2 valve replacements in 1991, and I have been living and working in Alice Springs since 2002. My story began when I became very sick at the age of 5, living in central Queensland in Hughenden. I was diagnosed with rheumatic heart disease, and my immediate family and maternal grandparents were very worried because I was the only one in our family to have rheumatic heart disease. My mother and her parents left Hughenden to move to Townsville so I could access the rheumatic heart specialist. My recollection of my early childhood was that I was very sick and missed a lot of schooling. My mother had to stop work until I was able to leave the hospital. When I did leave the hospital, my grandmother cared for me until I returned to school. My younger brother became my older brother, caring for me because of my isolation with the rheumatic heart disease. In my early teenage years, I lived a very active lifestyle, playing several sports such as rugby league, AFL football, soccer, basketball without any problems. But my family were very concerned because of the advice from the medical specialist that I was not to overexert myself. In my late teens, it was getting a bit more difficult to maintain a constant control of my medication taking. I had left the comfort of home, working and living with my first girlfriend, and it was my responsibility to make sure I was taking the medication. I was a father in 1990, and my worst fear was that my child would have rheumatic heart disease. A combination of things such as overexerting myself at work, drinking alcohol, inappropriate diet, and not taking my medication regularly was a big factor in the outcome of me having my valve replacements in 1991. My family were that stressed out about the operation. I was included in prayers and Sunday Mass, and my family even arranged cultural medicine men to look me over to see if they could fix the problem before the operation. I was in and out in 7 days, and my family wanted me to go back and live at home, but I chose to keep working and continue to live with my girlfriend. Our relationship didn't last long after the operation. I tried to live a healthy and active lifestyle after the operation, but that didn't last too long because of peer pressure, work commitments, and being too young to understand what I had just been through. In my early 20s, I married, and I started to have some control over my medication taking, INR results, meeting medical appointments, and self-care to a degree. I was still drinking alcohol and started to smoke cigarettes due to the stress of being a provider in my marriage. My wife was aware of my medical history, and she tried her best to ensure that I was taking my medication, having regular INR tests, and making sure I attended medical appointments. Even though I was drinking alcohol, I was able to control my INR through missing warfarin dosages when I had too much to drink. It worked out well because it was stable. My wife and I had our first child in 1997, and my concerns had not changed about my own children having rheumatic heart disease. I was informed by medical professionals that rheumatic heart disease is not hereditary. After my second child, I left hard labouring work and started doing shift work, which led to office work. I've been working in child protection for 6 years now, and the demands on work life and also my family life are overwhelming. I've found if I walk for 30 minutes for 4 days a week and live a healthy lifestyle, I'm able to handle any stress. But when my exercise ceases because of work commitments, it takes me longer to recover from being sick. My lifestyle has changed a little in the last 6 years because of my attitude that I've always worked to live, not lived to work. And also living in Central Australia, there are so many hidden dangers that could affect my health and even leading to death. I found in 2008 that I'm able to get a better balance between my work, family life, and my health. And I'm also more appreciative of my medical history, and that I need to take care of myself for my children and for my wife. I don't play any sports anymore because when I'm injured, it takes me longer to recover. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'll just ask Sam if he can take a seat on the panel, and I'll ask Jonathan and Steve if they could please come up, and then we will have time for some questions.
It's a big commitment, and especially with me doing the bad things as drinking and cigarettes, I've always made sure I do my walking, keep my health up, because I find that when I keep working, I'll get sick. But if I keep my fitness up, I'm fine then, until one day something might just happen and I get sick, and then I'm sick for 2 weeks, off work. So yeah, the health side is very important, and the information about the operation is important as well to the clients.
Okay, I think Graham has a question at the front. No.
Oh, sorry, my name's Debbie Ferrin and I'm a paediatrician here in Alice Springs. Just, Sam, do you think we could do something like a mentoring system or something for our new young children or younger children that are diagnosed with rheumatic fever, meeting up with someone like yourself who's been through it, had the operations, all that sort of stuff, and knows what they are going to do, what's going to happen to them if they don't take care of themselves? Do you think that would be something that would be a good idea?
It's just that I find that I have no spare time with work.
Doesn't all have to be you, Sam.
No, but it's good to set up where somebody else has gone through that experience, especially another Aboriginal person from Central Australia, that could feed back to the clients that are starting to have that procedure.
My name's Cam Saraswati. I'm a GP out at Utopia, just northeast from Alice Springs. And my question is probably to Steve or the paediatricians. I was kind of mildly reassured to hear that most of the intervention referrals with murmurs were negative, because I hadn't found heaps of those murmurs. But in general, just an impression of the kids who we send in for echoes, but they're asymptomatic, so they're not clinical cases. Are most of those actually negative echoes and there's not rheumatic? In other words, or should we be better at our heart sounds?
Okay. Just the answer is that probably auscultation, you can't ignore it, and if you find someone who's got a cardiac murmur, then you need to do what you're doing, and you certainly want to be getting a fair few normal echoes to reassure yourself that you're not missing cases, and occasionally you will come up with a clinical case. The sad reality though is that the evidence is emerging that the stethoscope is far from the best tool to find cases, and that's the screening stuff that Stephen showed, that the echo is much more sensitive and specific for detecting rheumatic heart disease. In fact, it's the gold standard. And now people are really moving towards the concept of getting echoes out and even replacing the stethoscope potentially. That's what our study is all about, trying to sort out. The big issue that Steve highlighted is, are we at risk of overdiagnosing? If we've got a very sensitive tool, then are there actually going to be some kids who are normal who are we're going to find mitral regurgitation in and call them rheumatic heart disease? And that has been the big concern. For example, the study that Stephen showed from Africa that found an incredibly high rate, 3 to 4% of kids with rheumatic heart disease, whereas only 1/10 of those seem to have significant heart murmurs. How many of those kids really have rheumatic heart disease? We are hopefully going to get some definitive data to sort that out, because one thing we're also doing is echoing 1,000 healthy middle-class kids in Darwin and Cairns to try and figure out what's normal and what's abnormal. So I guess a long answer to your question, I think you need to keep doing what you're doing. The stethoscope is still important, and if you find someone who's got a cardiac murmur, they still need to be followed up just as they always were. But the number of cases you'll find that way, I suspect, is just the tip of the iceberg of real rheumatic heart disease that's out there.
My name's Gwenda Glass and I work at Whirly Whirl in Katherine. I'm the clinic coordinator, registered Aboriginal health worker. I have many years of experiences in AMSs, and I have worked in our rheumatic health programs too over the years. I myself have had rheumatic heart disease in my lifetime. Today I still have a murmur, which I have a cardio testing every 2 years. When clients come into our clinic, especially little kids, I sit down and I tell them my stories, and they look at me and say, "Gutchinga, you're not sick, you know." But I have a big interest in that, because my lifetime as a child was in and out of hospital, and I come from Mitchell in Queensland, and me and my cousin, we were the same age, and she had a triple bypass in 2000, and then strokes, and she passed away a couple of years ago. So in one sense, I guess I'm one of the luckier ones, and I am not very health conscious within myself for my own health either.
You're probably too busy looking after other people. That's experienced rheumatic heart disease like yourself and like Sam. To those of us who haven't personally experienced it, that's so valuable to hear what you think. Question at the front.
Warren Walsh from Sydney, where there's no cases of acute rheumatic fever. I have to come out here to see them. Just a question to Jonathan. Where are we with the National Registry for Rheumatic Fever and Rheumatic Heart Disease? And I just make the point that in New South Wales, rheumatic fever is not a notifiable disease. And also, could I also suggest that we look at the National Registry for Cardiac Surgery in Rheumatic Heart Disease, because there's enormous variation in the surgical management of rheumatic heart disease around the country, and we have no national data.
Thanks, Warren. The good news is that we will have something on a national scale very soon. The government, as you know, announced in their budget this year $11 million, $11.2 million for, they call it I can't remember what we call it, rheumatic fever strategy, I think it was called. The problem is sorting out exactly what they're going to do. And there's some confusion because there's a document they're working on, which is what they made the budget announcement around, which was a few years old. And then separately, there's been a process within government that has been trying to develop a more up-to-date approach to rheumatic fever control. So we're trying to work out those details, and the government, I hope, soon will make an announcement about what the strategy will entail. But I can tell you it will include undoubtedly support for registers in at least Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia, potentially in other jurisdictions, but I suspect we need a bit more information about those other jurisdictions. It will include some sort of national coordinating body, and part of their job will be to ensure there's uniformity of the register across jurisdictions. It will include support, we hope, for the real issue, which is linking the register to the primary healthcare services, and how you get health workers and nurses to talk to the people at the clinic level, educate them, work with them about improving compliance. Potentially it will include this focus on ensuring that surgical management is delivered